in different living labs in different places, and these kinds of presentation would be focused on Penteli, which is really different from Geneva or from Munich. So it's like sharing our perspective and sharing our ways to evaluate the mobility hubs. And of course, during my presentation, when I talk about the different ways of evaluating mobility hubs and stuff like that, I will try to connect the different scales of cities or of context and all these things that make our living labs different. But this is somehow quite a beautiful thing. So, evaluation framework for mobility hubs and Penteli here in the subtitle. So once more, we have to see again where are we, where our story unfolds. This is very interesting, and I have to highlight that again that Penteli is a mountainous area, is a suburb of the metropolitan area in Athens, so it's not like dealing with central places. It's totally different, more difficult, and of course, it's something that when you don't have the expertise and you don't have such kind of interventions and such kind of equipment in your city, is totally different to evaluate it. So here we are. Our goal is to embrace sustainable mobility, and that's why we have different measures. And one of them is the mobility hubs creation. So here are our main policy measures. And to be honest, before some, Penteli has nothing to do with any of that. So we can see that during and through our project, we try to rethink totally what mobility is, and especially when it comes to mobility hubs. In order to evaluate something, you have to understand it. So I will share some slides before talking about the evaluation framework, about how we tried to identify our mobility hub, because we only have one, and this is a nice difference, an interesting difference between Geneva and Munich or Krakow and other cities that we have much more. So we have one, but we do think that when you try to change things, there are many multiple ways. They can be radical, they can be gradual, and we have considered and we have selected to take the path of gradual changes. Okay, it's our perspective, but we think that it really fits our living lab. So with the hubs creation, this is what we're talking about today, and the evaluation. And first of all, why we need them? Why we need such hubs, especially in a city like Penteli? Our conventional approach is until now, and it's not only related to Penteli, it's related to any city in Greece. We do not have this kind of culture of bringing together different modes. We try to somehow separately design them and plan them. So this is a problem. This makes isolated modes which could be near each other, the stations, or the possibility to rent a bike or to park your bike and go to another mode, but they are not physically and also cognitively, like in a cognitive way, connected. So we need to change these kinds of rationale and integrate them. And that's very important when we talk about sustainable mobility and seamless mobility primarily. And this kind of integration will help us later to evaluate it, because this is like the changing, the turning point of conventional approaches and something new for us at least. And we can see that we need to integrate different modes. We need to integrate public transport, either it's local or it's the metropolitan one, we need to integrate the bike sharing, and we have bikes in Penteli. We need also to integrate somehow taxi services, ride-hailing services, because it's really important when you need, especially in car-centric areas like our living lab. It's really important to gradually shift from the personal car to a shared car or a car that does not belong to you, and you have to take it for your ride, and that's all. So it's a shift of culture, not only a shift of the real behavior itself. So we need to understand the modes that we have to integrate. We also have in the future, we're thinking about that to integrate e-scooters as well, but we haven't done that yet. But you can see these multiple choices that one can have in integrating and formulating mobility, and much more. If you have also suburban train or metro, these are not attached to our area, but you can see these kinds of integration. So we need to shift from one condition to another and separate things. So mobility hubs is about not separating, about integrating things. This is the main rationale, and that's how we think of that in Penteli. So just a little and some few words about why we need them and the pros and cons. Because when we have to intervene into our area, it's not only about thinking of the benefits. The benefits are like the primary consideration, but we need to think of the problems, because somehow you need to deal with them. You do not have only to appraise the, let's say, the benefits, but also to consider and deal effectively with problems. So here from the literature, we can see that mobility hub could be something very beneficial to mobility as a service solutions. Also, it's like an identity of place making, something like that. You deliver a different place. You merge things together. You merge stations together. You have to be effective in these kinds of redefines the public space in your city, and also it's like a very, very critical opponent, and the chain that connects all the modes, so it could be effective against the private cars. But on the other hand, at the same time, you may face problems, especially when you don't have available space. And in our case, that is one major problem that we had when we tried to identify where the main location of the mobility hub would be. So that's a very important problem that we have to deal with. And also there are some other problems, like the how you really integrate them. You schedule all the modes to facilitate one another and stuff like that. And one more that we have to underline is making or exacerbating inequities, because it's not only about making things better, but how you distribute these benefits. So that would be pros and cons about the mobility hubs, and I noted our perspective into the problem of space specifically, and then it comes others like what modes we should integrate. But mainly we had the problem of space in Penteli. So we also need to think that and consider that when we plan about mobility hubs, it's not like one size to fit them all. And that was really, really important when we did our planning efforts in Penteli. And that was also something that we differentiated ourselves, and it's reasonable compared to other living clubs, because thanks to all these kinds of interactions between the living clubs, which is really important. We really thank all the others that we, from previous expert sessions, or from other kinds of presentations during W before, or we tried to understand how the others do it, so we can borrow things, and borrowing things when you try to tailoring it to your area is really effective, and it's something that continues and bond different places. So we try to understand what is really a mobility hub. Is it the same? Are there only points in some areas? There are like places, and they are all different. But we understood that they're not. They are something very, very like it's a concept that has different scales. So we have to understand that, and this is important. How to evaluate it? You can't evaluate the same way. Of course, there are some general principles, and we have to follow them. But you can't exact with the exact same way evaluate all the mobility hubs that like they have different, they have the same range, or they have the same, let's say, importance, the same equipment, the same structure. They are different. So we need to understand their role. And we tried in our case, and you will see that later in the next slides, that our mobility hub would be something of more of a city center, but what city center? City center of Penteli only. It wouldn't be a mobility hub for the metropolitan area of Athens. And because we don't have many mobility hubs, and we try to do that in the next years to come, because we didn't have the expertise in that. But we couldn't show you this kind of richness in mobility hubs. But in other areas, you would identify them, because they would have a community hub or a neighborhood, or like if we see that picture on the left, it would be like the minor, the major ones with priorities and stuff like that. We are outside of the center. So we try to take these kinds of conceptual visualizations, these diagrams, all these kinds of knowledge from other places in living labs, and try to identify our role. And we think that we cannot do such a detailed conceptualization of our mobility hub, and we see that it's a city center for Penteli, but it would be like a neighborhood or even a community hub for Athens. So this is very important to evaluate that. Otherwise, you would fall into the trap of considering all of these kinds of mobility hubs the same, and you can't evaluate them afterwards. So we are like somewhere here for Athens, and for our mobility hub in Penteli, we are here. So that could be reflected on how we evaluate it. We prefer to evaluate it locally. It's like being in the center of Penteli. We didn't care, we couldn't, and we didn't want to care about all the metropolitan area of Athens. And so this is very important. One size fits them all. It's like an approach that we try to follow in all our measures, but especially with the hubs. And here we are. I will try to talk about the decision criteria, because they are fully connected with how you evaluate it. Otherwise, if you don't specify criteria when you have nothing, if you want to build something new, it's not like we have 50 mobility hubs and we build another one. Okay, that would be like a business as usual process, but we don't have anything. So we have zero ground. It's like nothing, and we try to understand where to put that certain mobility hubs and certain mobility hub, and to give it another dimension. We try to appraise that. We did really our mobility hub have a big thing. That's a difference. That's a difference compared to other areas, because we didn't have any such things, and we try to understand what decision criteria we should take into account. And here we can discuss it afterwards, because it's not like we in Penteli we adopted 4 criteria or 5, and that's a universal principle. No, it's about what suited our purpose, and it's a tailor-made approach. So we thought that when selecting a mobility the transport modes that are available. And that's why the first step that we follow is about mapping the bike station. So the primary, like let's say, the primary focus was on the bike service stations. So we identified them because we had strategically placed them somewhere, and we said that our mobility hub would certainly accommodate bike service stations. So this differentiates us from other approaches. And here we are. We had the 6 bike stations. We have still they are there, despite of some events like in the previous August, like the wildfire that might affect it here, but they are still standing 6 bike stations. And we said that this would be our lead, the bike stations. And what else? We needed more, because we can't just focus and roll the dice and select which one. We could do that, we'd roll the dice, but we didn't. We were like, okay, we want strategic places to identify the potential, and we also want a central place, because we didn't, in the context, the local context of Penteli, we didn't want to build just a mobility hub. We did want to build a central mobility hub for our context, not the Athens metropolitan area in general, but for Penteli. So we identified the land uses, and that would be our second step to have really mixed land uses. And that would be also an indicator of evaluating something, because if land uses are changing, okay, they have some formal principles that they should they dictate them. You can't, for example, go to an industrial area and build houses. They would be you may have a conflict, but here we have areas and land uses that are changing, and they have potential. For example, here there are residential the residential land uses, they are the dominated place, but we see that gradually they are shifted to also shops, restaurants, and stuff like that. But we didn't want to adopt an area that has this potential. We did want to adopt an area that already functions as a center. So we took this place because the land uses helped us to do that, and also it's a place with centrality because it has this major route here. If you can see that, excuse me for not including that into a separate line, but here it is. You can follow the marker here. So we have a central place in terms of modes, in terms of land uses, and the final criterion is the available space that we talked before. Because when you build a mobility hub and so you build your first mobility hub, you have to make it big. You have to make it like a symbol in your area. That's also another difference. The symbolism and how the residents perceive that, because it's not like only an operational feature. It's firstly an operational feature, but for areas that do not have the culture, it's like a symbol in your area. Oh, what is that? They put like a totem, but you can see that the space is different. So we needed available space to put the different kinds of stations, or to merge them differently. And here we also have a square. You can't see that, but I will give you this kind of guidance. Here it's a square. It has a church, so it's like the center of the municipal community of Milicia, which is that. And you have the land uses, you have the space, you have the square, so you have and also the arterial here. The route is like the width is large, so it's large enough, so you can accommodate all these different modes. That helped us to identify our mobility application, and all these kinds of criteria which will help us in the future to extend the mobility hubs, because we will try to understand their role. But before deciding where to invest in the next, we will then, because we will have more than one, we will try to assign roles to each one. For example, primary mobility hub, secondary, tertiary, and stuff like that. So right now it's easy. We have one, and these are the criteria that we utilized. So here it is. You can see again this kind of picture. I don't have any picture right now from a very real show, but I promise that I would have preferably in the next meeting. I hope so to have a decent picture to show you, because it's really different than one PDF or PNG picture from when we designed that, but something real there. So you can see the route here and the square, and also these kind of this is the church, and these are the areas that we have. The bike sharing station here, and we have the station for public transport here, and also here there is space for taxis and this kind of services to drop off and drop on clients. So what beyond how we identified the space of the location of our mobility hub, another very important thing is that you try to bring modes together, but some modes they need infrastructure outside of the mobility hub. Otherwise, it could be like an island. If you do the mobility hub, you have the routes of motorized movement, then you can connect the mobility hub. But what's about cycling? So what we really did is that we connected another measure, of course, which is like the thinking of street space. It's like the street reallocation, and we specifically did this kind of cycle street network that we are going to implement after summer. I think that it would start to implement it after summer, because we are now at the consultation to take the approval of the municipal council. And you may see that we on purpose connected the area around the mobility hub. So if someone wants to go to the mobility hub by cycling, he or she or they can go easily. So that's another point. And I have to mention that when we plan a mobility hub, especially for our case, which is one, I'm constantly bringing that up because it's like only one. And you have to identify the networks like beyond that. But it's easy with buses. It's easy with metro lines. It's easy even with the road transport. But in our case, that we do not have any infrastructure related to cycling, it's not easy at all. So we tried to connect one measure to another, the mobility hub with the street reallocation, and we didn't plan this kind of pilot cycle street project into another area of Penteli. We purposely did that here, so you can see the connection. And right now, after all these kinds of not introduction, it's not an introduction. Okay, here we have an introduction of what mobility hub. It's an integral procedure of to understand why we need mobility hubs, how we can design them, and then it comes to the evaluation. But otherwise, it's like a very typical process of, okay, if this is the mobility hub generally, this is the mobility hub eventually, and this is the evaluation. No, I tried to show and to describe all our way of thinking, and here we are about the evaluation. Otherwise, if we just stick to general principles, then we miss the meaning of the living lab. Because the living lab, the word says itself, living, something that is somewhere specifically, and we need to understand the context of that in order to evaluate. If we just copy paste and borrow things without connecting them to our to our context and to our culture, we can't efficiently give results after that. So our perspective in evaluating our mobility hub is close, is really related to Penteli and in general to places that do not have these kinds of expertise. But we will say that again, we will say that later, we can connect it to different scales. But primarily, let's focus on how we can evaluate that. So holistic approaches are essential. The integration is not only about planning, and okay, we integrate the measures together, but it's also about integrating different methods. And that's something that we should take into account. It needs more time, it needs more expertise. For example, you have to find someone that could use GIS, for example, or you could find someone that is he or she or they are really good into co-creation workshops. You need people to do that. That's something that would lead to a decent evaluation framework. Otherwise, it could be, again, business as usual. Okay, I did like one questionnaire and that's all. No, we really think that if you try to delve into our, let's say, our mobility hub or our measures in general, you have to really understand different methods and to mix them and to prioritize them. So we can have different kinds of pathways. Here we can see the most important ones for our case. Some of them we can deliver them afterwards. Of course, I have integrated, I have added some more to connect them with other methods, but I will notify you about each of them and which we really can use for Penteli. So we have analytical hierarchy process. The first one, it's really important to take this criteria that I've mentioned or others and to rank them. You can have some very interesting results of how to quantify what and give each mobility hub a score. So this is very important. Analytical hierarchy process. We'll see that in the next slide. Another one, okay, the most common one, but okay, why not taking the simpler way? Because simple is somehow effective and not alone, but not as a standalone evaluation method, but it's something that we have to do. Questionnaires, interviews, it's really important. The third one is about accessibility analysis. We can deliver that, and each mobility hub, if they have more expertise, they can do simulation things, they can do other things or optimization things. So you can have like analysis that they depict the changes before mobility hubs and after that into from a geographical perspective, especially when we talk about accessibility analysis. Another one is somehow vague, but it's important. Operational efficiency. I said about optimization, that would be one, or other things about business plan. When you have different modes and you have to integrate them, you have to talk about with different service providers and persuade them. Okay, bring your, for example, your e-scooters in our municipality because we want to build a mobility hub. We want them there. You have to put them there if they are docked. Put them there, not elsewhere. So you have to persuade them in order to benefit the mobility hub and then benefit the community and also benefit them as well. It's a win-win situation as we think of that. So, and the last one is something really important because we experienced that through our two co-creation workshops. One of them was in physical, and the other one was online. And thanks to the SAM project, we backed it into that pathway. So we really think that, okay, what's about utilizing cooperation workshops for our mobility hubs? Because it's time consuming to find all these people, but all these people, especially if they're from Penteli, they could be very, very useful, and that could be also beneficial to them as well. And we think that co-creation workshops of really having them together and at the same place and to discuss with them, it's really helpful when evaluating or planning, even methods, and I will talk for each of these methods here in the next slides. So about analytical layer process is something that we built on in our evaluation process of all the measures. But what we did, because this process has different scales, you can have different levels. You have a first level of comparing all the policy measures with each other. So you have like bike sharing compared to mobility hubs, creation mobility hubs compared to public transport and stuff like that. So you compare all of them, and you can have a general level of the policy measures. But next, you could be more detailed, and you can deliver results, especially for each policy measure intervention. So we tried to do that with 26 participants. 20 to 30 is really a good number for analytical hierarchy process. And we identified these three criteria. We didn't want to integrate more. We could, but we didn't, because we set up like a large procedure of comparing the other modes as well, because this kind of our survey, the HP survey, was for all the measures together to save time. But if we did that only for mobility hubs, we could also integrate it other kinds of criteria. So for evaluation criteria, here we have three only, but they're really important. And you can see that we have connectivity of modes. For example, I have only bike sharing, and in imaginary case, we have bike sharing and taxi services. But what about if another mobility hub has, in another case, has taxi services, public transport, e-scooters, e-bikes? So the connectivity of modes, you have more modes, so it's better. Another one, we have discussed it in a previous section of our project, and it's really important, is to maintain or to create urban identity of these things, because mobility hubs are not only, as I said before, are not only an operational matter. It's about also delivering different public space. And the third one is the signage, the totem things, so that you can understand it. It's accessible to anyone, because you can imagine that if you build a very big totem which is not readable, or you can't reach the height to see the text or the maps, it's useless. So you have to really build on that. Or we had two sides, one in English and one in Greek, so that it would be also useful to someone that is a visitor to the area, or he lives there, but they can't speak Greek properly, so they can have this kind of inclusivity. So these are three criteria. We can integrate more in the future, and in your case of mobility hubs, you can integrate it as much as you want, but please stick to a number of below 10, because otherwise the ranking would be disastrous for the user. And this is the result. You can get like weights, and if you do assign like numbers or something of scoring into each one, you can deliver, and you can generate a score for each mobility hub. For example, we have one. We could have, okay, we can compare it to others, but in a case of Munich, they have much more. You can score them and identify where the problems are with numbers, which is very helpful when you try to replan them or to evaluate them. So analytical hierarchy process are our main evaluation method, and we also have interviews that we can utilize. So in questionnaires. In our case, we did a very simple questionnaire of before we build the building hub, of how you usually would you consider such a building hub. And we can see the distribution of the answers, and we can see that they are leaning positive view, but we think in the future, if you want to do such an evaluation properly, you do not have only one question in a questionnaire. You could also make stated preferences surveys, which are really helpful when you have scenarios of designing different things. Or another one, very, very important, is the in-depth interviews. You have some people like 20 to 30, which is also a very nice sample, and you really dig into how you think and how you perceive mobility hubs. So another pathway of methods is the surveys. And here we can see other insights from the Athens metropolitan area from another project that we have found. It's very important to see other areas how they work. Here is a suburban area of Vula, and another area in Iraq is more is closer to the center, and we can see how they rank and how important they find the characteristics of mobility hubs. So we can see that all these kind of interviews and surveys are really helpful when you evaluate your mobility hub. Here is another perspective that I said before. This is the accessibility analysis. Here is like the principles. This is a map of Berlin, not Athens. It's like a conceptual identification that I used to help you identify what we did, to help you understand what we did. We use this Hansen formula. Anyone can differentiate that, but we use this Hansen formula. And what we really did is that we calculated the accessibility without the mobility hub, and after that. So you can see, and also without the cycle streets, because we thought that cycle streets was a part of delivering mobility hub. This, for example, is only like a standard speed for not cyclists, for standard speed for cycling, including the elevation of Penteli and also using the buses. But here you have a cycle street that can give you more flexible and more comfortable like a process of cycling, so you can increase your speed safely. And also you have the mobility hub that is a point that connects really all these modes. Otherwise, this mode cannot connect, and you can't leave one and embark into another. And you can see this is very, very, very clear that when you have a mobility hub, and imagine adding more of them, you have this like spatial approach of seeing the results. So accessibility analysis is very helpful. And operational efficiency, we don't have any like clear results to share, but we can see that we can deal with and address operators. We can also try to understand the multimodal trip efficiency with time to change modes or the time of travel in general. We can see also the data of usage of the mobility sign if you put like a QR code and stuff like that. And you can also utilize very simple methods like quality assurance services, like a checklist. Oh, we do that, we don't do that, we don't do that, and stuff like that. Because I mentioned that simplicity somehow is better than complex things and very, very confusing evaluation methods, especially if you want to engage people. So operational efficiency is another pathway, very, very important. And the last one, before we close our session, is about co-creation workshops. And to be honest, I'm really, really happy to say that before SAM, we didn't have any, not only idea, but also we didn't have any specific preference to this kind of workshops. We didn't. Through SAM, we tried to, let's do that. Let's bring people together in the same space, in the same table, or the same chair, for example, in chairs close to them, and talk about mobility hubs, other interventions, and get their So this is kind of an introductory question. So that's why I integrated and I am showing percentages. Most of them, they were moderately informed. Some of them were well, and limited also was 23%. So we had, for example, I think 12 participants, if I'm not right, in the physical process, and 16 into the online process. And especially in the physical process, we try to really explain to them what is a mobility hub, and then we receive some answers. I can't quantify them, but I have shared to you the meaning, the general meaning. They were like, "Oh, this is really helpful," and okay, we have some concerns about how it can work. We want them to be um, really seamless. That, for example, bike service station, we can, if we get off the bus, we can see where it is. So please put a sign in the bus station that in 50 meters or 20 meters to the left or to the right, here you can find the bike service station. So we got some insights that we can use in the future. So co-creation workshops is a really, really good method, even for mobility hubs, even for something that they didn't, they weren't well informed. So you have to explain to them, and it's better to explain it in plain terms together, that they feel comfortable, and then they can share the knowledge to others. They can spread the word. Okay, use the demands from the mayor, more mobility hubs, because we were in this co-creation workshop, and all these kind of experts were very informative about mobility hubs, and we want more. So co-creation workshop is not something that can be quantified, but it's something that can be valued to our purpose. And to to conclude and towards the future, to hubbing the city, our city, because other cities are already hub, but and I will have to connect these kind of different scales. For our case, we need to improve the number of mobility hubs. Another very, very interesting thing is about digital mobility hubs. And I've seen a picture from Munich, that you have something like that into center into the university, if I'm right, in June, that have something that is digital, and you can see different types of reaching things, which is really impressive for our case. We can't deliver that, but we certainly want to do it in the future, and also to start monitoring properly, because right now we are in a condition, when in a path that we try to understand different methods, and we are sharing it to you. And what about different scales? Okay, we talked about different methods, different mobility hubs, and about Penteli, but all these methods, if you primarily or beforehand assign the role to its mobility hub, then you can evaluate that accordingly. For instance, you can run different, you can conduct different AHP processes, one for the central mobility hubs and another for the community mobility hubs, or for suburban mobility hubs. So you can differentiate the AHP process, or you can share different kinds of accessibility analysis. For example, you can assign weights to the central mobility hubs that are more accessible, and lower weights to others. Or if you want to do it in a reverse way, you can assign greater values in community hubs and less into central mobility hubs. But the most important thing is to raise local awareness of what are these kind of hubs, especially in our case, how you can use it, and how to really integrate sustainable modes. Because otherwise, if you don't have these chains, if you don't have this kind of chain, you can't meet cars, because they will be seamless, despite of the congestion, especially in Penteli, but we do not have so much congestion. They would always win. So we really need mobility hubs, and we really need to evaluate them, to promote them into the community, so that we can build more and be more efficient. That would be all. Thank you so much, because I used much time, but I wanted to describe all these kind of problems and potentials that we have in our city. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stefanos. Thank you, Stefanos, for an elaborate presentation. So we really had a good overview about the work being done in Penteli. Are there any questions here? No questions? Tom.
Thank you so much. Very, very, sorry, I just had to close the door. Sorry for that. Thank you so much. Very, very good insight. Your reflection on co-creation workshops. What do you think will be the next steps after co-creation workshop? What is your advice? We have also had that in Fredrikstad with our experience from that. But what do you think will be the next step for you related to the workshop that you had?
Thanks, Tom. That's a really, really good question, because it's really connected to how we utilize this kind of knowledge that we get. And I'm saying knowledge and not data, because we really get knowledge from the co-creation workshop, and we think of that as an opportunity to discuss with people and get informed in a way that is their reflections on the matters. And also, it's really helpful. And I said that about interactions between living clubs, because we saw your co-creation workshops not into the topic, because we have different topics, but about the method. And we saw how you promoted the insights and how you described them. So it was really helpful for us. But that's the comment about interaction. So the step after that, we do really believe that we have to gather all these kind of insights that they demonstrated people back there. Okay, they weren't 50 people, they were 12, if I remember correctly, and then to somehow categorize them and try to see if we can really deliver that into practice. For example, this kind of advice into, okay, put some signs from one station to another. They are indeed close, but someone may not know where to turn. It would be 20 meters away, but you can't find it. So this was a very, very important insight, and we tried to document them together, and then try to understand and to find solutions to implement them. So that would be the next step from our side. And another, to be really, really have a cooperation continuity, is to make some 1 year or 1 year and a half again, something like that, to really regain their insights, because it's not only evaluating for one time, it's about evaluating them constantly, but not every month. That would be lovely, but okay, they all have other responsibilities, but every 1 year, something like that, to regain their insights. So the next step would be to categorize them. This would be our work to do, and then to call them for another round when their ideas and our expertise and our funding delivered something new. So that could be a potential future action about that.
Thank you so much. And last one, I took your pros and cons, and I see that they are very useful for us as well in our new street use plan, to see where we can better utilize mobility hubs related to your experiences and pros and cons. So we have to see that in terms of that as well. And last, to integrate mobility hubs to people's day-to-day life will take time. And we have tried that, and we see that it will take time. And we while in Munich a week ago, I saw how mobility, micromobility, and mobility hubs already was very integrated in people's everyday life. So that was very, very interesting to see, because it is natural. It's a natural part of the infrastructure. So we have a lot of learning points. So I think the data that you have and the methodology that you have provided and presented here is very interesting for us to dive deeper into, related to when we are scoping our mobility hubs as well. So thank you so much, and I will reach out to have more insight in the methodology.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. And that's just something I'm really agree with you. And that is the interesting thing. The interesting part is of understanding these kind of differences between mobility hubs and between the scales and between cultures. For example, in our case, time is really needed, and it's something that it's natural, because a mobility hub is there, and if you can't understand the potential, but if you can't promote that correctly to the people, they may not use it. They may rely onto the cars. So it's like the methods we conducted, or we promote, we like suggest to others to follow. They could be really helpful, and they would be also tailor-made to your case. And I'm really happy if you have anything to share or to discuss. Of course. Thank you so much.
I just had a comment, because I find it's a brilliant idea to have a follow-up co-creation workshop, because the user satisfaction is also something that you have to take into consideration, and especially for mobility hubs, it's not one rule for all, like you just mentioned. It's also the land use, if it's mixed land use, more residential or differing to the area, so a blueprint in a particular area that works could not work in the other areas. So this follow-ups, which are regular, so not just evaluation, but also monitoring if the systems are working in place, and then how to add on the micromobility services to it and make it kind of more usable or user-friendly would be the ultimate goal. So thank you for your feedback and the very detailed presentation. It was very interesting for all of us, and the learnings are, we take them with us. Any more questions here?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, two basic remarks. One is that it seemed as if the bike stations were quite far from one another, but also not covering the periphery of Penteli. So it seems as if people would have to walk a kilometer sometimes in order to even get a bike, and then return it there at evening and then go home, which means they're not really just using a bike, they're using walking and bikes. By the way, the bikes are electric, all of them, some of them?
All of them. Luckily.
Okay.
Luckily, because we have a great inclinations and hilly slope there.
Okay, so that's exactly my second remark. What I remembered from our visit is that the topography in Penteli is quite steep, and I also remember that in summer it was quite hot, and I can only imagine at winter it might be chilly. Therefore, it's very important. I have to say, sorry for being blunt, but one of the cheapest ways to improve transportation is bikes, even if they're electric. And therefore, I would consider more of those stations around, even if each station only have like 5 to 10 spaces. And then people can go all over the city, also not from their neighborhood to the line of hubs, which basically it seemed there is like a line of hubs in the kind of the city center, okay, of Penteli, but also from one station to another. And another last remark is, with all due respect to sharing and asking the people. With bikes, for example, if you ask the people, at least in Israel, they'll say we want more parking for our private cars, and we are not so considerate of the bike lanes. Okay, that's what we ask the people. But as officials, we know there's just not enough space for the cars. Therefore, we have to do something with bikes. So sometimes we have to be very careful in how we hear what people want. Okay, sometimes what they want will not give us really a social benefit, and therefore it's tricky. That's it from my side.
Thank you for all of these remarks. Can I add something to what you said? Right. Thank you for all of these three remarks, because they are really helpful for us, and it's even greater to see that you have an experience, especially for the last point, because yeah, indeed, it's about, I think it's about how you present things, how you communicate with them. If you do only just say to them, okay, free car, free parking, and I have a bike, they would be, I like bikes, but I really like free cars, parking space, and free car use. So I think we have to find a way, and that's how we try to do that, to somehow not strict, to be not being strict, but also being somehow giving them real options, or try to unveil different ways of thinking when we talk to them. For example, if they are like very pro car, we have to underline the problems of space, because we do have real problems, and with maps or with experience analysis. So one method, all these methods that I showed, they could be, for example, related to one method to another. For instance, you could do an experience analysis about something, and then show it to the cooperation workshop, and you have concrete things to declare to them. So they were okay. Maybe cycling works. That's about the third point, because it's really important how you communicate with them, and communication is even greater when you try to take their points. Otherwise, if they are scared, or they do not feel comfortable, or they are just to confirm your ideas, that's not useless, but that's not helpful. You need to have a discussion with them, and even to disagree. But all, as you said, into something that you provide the problems. Here is the problem of free car parking. This is the problem. You can see that. So they are like, okay, maybe I have to think of another way. About the other two comments, they are also helpful. The first one, especially, we think that these 6 stations are not enough. And in the HP process, but not from Mobility Hubs, we have integrated that, the connectivity of space of the stations, one between each other, to be closer, and also to be closer to public transportation. And we saw from the results that people want it. People want dense cycling stations. Otherwise, it's the problem that you described. They can't reach them. They would be like, okay, I have one here, but Penteli is massive. It's not an urban core municipality. It's massive. You remember that. You said that correctly. It's not only the topography. It's like all the municipality. So we do really think to increase the potential of new mobility hubs by firstly looking in adding more bike service stations, and that would be a solution. And generally, thank you so much, because we really invest in this discussion from different levels and from different experiences.
Sounds great. So, Yaron, do you still have the question, or is the hand raised earlier? Okay. So, if we do not have any further questions, I would like to say adios to everybody. It was great connecting with you, and we see each other on the 31st of July for our next meeting. It would be a little bit longer because we will have an expert session combined with an updates of the living labs. And then, of course, we will then decide if we want to have a meeting in August, which is a holiday period, but then we would directly meet at the General Assembly in September. So this is something we would decide. And I would send out the invitations for the 31st of July to everybody after this meeting. Any questions for me in particular?
Camille? Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you for this very interesting workshop. I just wanted to take a tiny minute at the end just to introduce myself. I'm the new project manager on the STEM projects. I'll be working with you for the reminder of this really cool project. I'll be meeting most of you in Fredrikstad, and it was a good way for me to kind of introduce the topic within the Living Lab, so that's great. So if you have any technical questions related to the management in general of the project, you can direct them to me. Julia is going to be with me for the next few